curious but skeptical, people who have tried rituals before and felt nothing, people who light the candle and place the salt and say the words, and then wait and feel deep in their chest a quiet but persistent doubt. The question is this: does any of this actually work if you don't fully believe it? Most teachers will tell you that faith is everything, that without belief, nothing moves, that doubt is the enemy of blessing, and they are not entirely wrong. But they are not telling you the whole truth either, because what the Kabbalistic tradition actually teaches about belief, about doubt, about skepticism, about the complicated inner world of a person who wants to change their life, but cannot yet fully surrender to the unseen, is far more nuanced, far more merciful, and far more powerful than anyone has told you. What you are about to hear might challenge everything you thought you knew about how spiritual law works. But stay with me, because if you have ever felt like a fraud performing a ritual you only half believed in, if you have ever wondered whether your doubt was canceling out your effort, then this teaching was made for you. And I promise you, by the end of what I am about to share, you will understand something that most people who practice these teachings never learn. There is a story told about a man named Yosef who came to a great rabbi in the city of Krakow sometime in the 18th century. Yosef was not a religious man. He was a merchant, practical, analytical, accustomed to measuring everything in weights and ledgers. His wife had begged him to visit this rabbi because their home had known nothing but hardship for 7 years. Failed business after failed business. A debt that kept growing no matter how hard he worked. And Yosef came. But he came with his arms crossed, metaphorically speaking. He sat across from the rabbi and said with remarkable honesty, "I don't believe any of this, but my wife believes, and I am desperate. So tell me, what do I do? My grandmother gave me these secrets in her home 50 years ago. Every blessing, every protection, every tradition that makes a Jewish home truly sacred. Now I've gathered them all into one book just for you. Visit the link in the description or pinned comment and let me be your grandmother too." The rabbi looked at him for a long moment, and then he smiled, and he said something that Yosef never forgot for the rest of his life. He said, "Good. A man who knows he doesn't believe is far closer to truth than a man who thinks he believes but doesn't." Think about that. Let it sit with you for a moment, because in those few words, the rabbi was transmitting something ancient, something that runs through the entire architecture of Kabbalistic thought like a golden thread. And that something is this: the tradition has always known that human beings are complicated, that faith is not a light switch you simply flip on, that the soul moves in layers, and what you consciously think you believe is only the outermost layer of who you truly are. The Zohar, which is the foundational text of Jewish mysticism, speaks of the human being as containing what it calls the nefesh, the ruach, and the neshama, 3 dimensions of the soul, each one deeper than the last. The nefesh is your animal self, your surface reactions, your habits and fears. The ruach is your emotional and intellectual self, where your doubts and your reasoning live. But the neshama is the deepest core. And this is the teaching that changes everything. The neshama never doubts. The neshama is a piece of the divine. It was breathed into you directly by the Creator, as it says in Genesis, and it carries within it an unshakable knowing. What this means and I want you to feel the weight of this, is that your doubt is not located in your deepest self. Your skepticism, your crossed arms, your prove it to me energy, all of that lives in the middle layers. It is real. It is valid. It is not something to be ashamed of. But it is not the totality of who you are. Somewhere beneath all of that rational resistance, there is a part of you that already knows, a part that is why you are here, right now, listening to this. Because the skeptic who truly does not care does not seek. They do not watch. They do not ask. And you are asking. Now this is where it gets truly remarkable. The rabbis of the Talmud debated extensively about something called kavanah, intention. Kavanah is the directed inner focus you bring to a spiritual practice. And there was a long-standing argument among scholars about whether a mitzvah, a spiritual act or ritual, requires kavanah to count. Does the action work if the heart is not fully present? Does the ritual carry power if the mind is wandering, or uncertain, or outright resistant? And the conclusion that emerged, a conclusion that has profound implications for every skeptic who has ever sat with a candle or a bowl of salt and felt foolish, is this: actions have their own spiritual weight. The physical gesture carries energy independent of what your conscious mind is doing at that moment. This is not magic. This is not superstition. This is a sophisticated spiritual understanding that recognizes that human beings are not just minds floating in space. We are bodies. We are matter. We live in a physical world that is also a spiritual world. Every surface, every corner, every object carrying frequency and information. When you perform a ritual, even reluctantly, even skeptically, even saying under your breath, "I don't really believe this, creep," you are still creating a physical event in the world. You are still moving matter. You are still directing energy with your hands, your breath, your presence. And the tradition says that this matters. It matters because the world responds to action. The blessing of Elijah did not wait for the widow of Zarephath to believe fully before it multiplied her oil. It waited for her to pour. My grandmother gave me these secrets in her home 50 years ago. Every blessing, every protection, every tradition that makes a Jewish home truly sacred. Now I've gathered them all into one book just for you. Visit the link in the description or pinned comment and let me be your grandmother too. Let me say that again because it is the center of everything I want you to understand today. The blessing did not require belief. It required action. She poured. And as she poured, the miracle met her motion. There is a teaching attributed to the Baal Shem Tov, the great founder of Hasidic Judaism, who lived in the 18th century in Eastern Europe and who revolutionized Jewish spiritual practice by making it accessible to ordinary people, to farmers and laborers and those who couldn't read, who felt excluded from the world of scholars and perfect faith. The Baal Shem Tov said, "A person should always begin with the action, begin with the external. The internal will follow." He understood something about human psychology that modern science has only recently begun to confirm, that behavior shapes belief more than belief shapes behavior. That when you act as if, the feeling eventually catches up. This is not a small thing. This is a revolution in how you understand your own potential. Now, I need to share something with you that is equally important. Because while it is true that action carries its own power, and while it is true that your deepest soul never doubts even when your mind does, There is also a principle in Kabbalah about what we call klipot, the husks or shells. These are spiritual forces of obstruction, of blockage, of noise that separates a person from the flow of divine abundance. And here is what the tradition teaches about doubt specifically. Sustained, deliberate, habitual doubt, the kind of doubt that becomes a wall you build brick by brick, does create interference. Not because God punishes you for not believing. Never that. But because doubt at its most hardened is a form of closedness, and blessing flows like water. It fills the spaces that are open to receive it. It cannot fill a vessel whose openings have been sealed. There is a difference, and this distinction is critical, between honest uncertainty and hardened cynicism. The skeptic who says, "I'm not sure this is real, but I am going to try with my whole body because I want my life to change," is in a profoundly different energetic position than the person who performs the ritual while internally mocking it, who goes through the motions purely to say they tried and prove that it doesn't work. The first person has uncertainty but is open. The second person is closed. And what you are closed to cannot enter. This is what the rabbi in Krakow understood about Yosef the merchant. Yosef didn't believe, but Yosef was honest, and honesty is itself a form of openness. He was not pretending. He was not performing faith he didn't have. He came as he was, and in the Kabbalistic tradition, this raw, humble honesty is considered one of the highest spiritual positions a person can occupy. The Psalms say, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted," not the most faithful, not the most learned, the brokenhearted, the ones who come with nothing to offer but their actual truth. Yosef the merchant followed the rabbi's instructions. He lit candles on Friday evening. He said the Shabbat blessing over bread, even though the words felt foreign in his mouth. He placed a small piece of cinnamon, a specific segula, a spiritual remedy for attracting warmth and prosperity into the home, near the entrance of his house, because the rabbi told him to. He did all of this, not believing, but doing, and something changed, not immediately, not dramatically, but within the year, one of his old debts was unexpectedly forgiven. A business contact he had lost touch with reached out with an opportunity. Small things. But to Yosef, they were significant enough that his arms began to uncross. Not because he had been convinced intellectually, but because he had experienced. And experience is the greatest teacher of all. Here is the practical understanding I want you to take from this. If you are a skeptic, if you sit here uncertain, curious, but cautious, then there is a specific way to approach these practices that honors your truth while still allowing the energy to move. Do not perform rituals while internally condemning them. That is not honest skepticism. That is self-sabotage dressed up as rationalism. Instead, perform them with what I would call sacred neutrality, a posture that says, I don't know if this is real, but I don't know that it isn't. I am going to act, and with full physical presence and intention, and I am going to observe. I am going to be a scientist of my own life. The Kabbalistic sages would call this approach emuna peshuta, simple faith, not complex theological conviction, not certainty, simply the decision to act as if the universe is listening and to pay attention to what follows. It is the faith of a child who plants a seed without being able to explain photosynthesis. The seed grows anyway, and this next principle, this is the one that separates those who remain stuck from those who begin to shift. It concerns what happens in the body during ritual, regardless of what the mind believes. When you light a candle in a quiet room and you sit with it and you speak words of blessing or prayer, even words you have memorized without feeling, something happens neurologically. Your nervous system responds to the ritual context. Your breathing slows. Your brainwave patterns shift. The body enters a receptive state that the scientific community calls the relaxation response, but which the Kabbalists knew thousands of years ago as a gateway, a thinning of the veil between your ordinary consciousness and the deeper awareness where change actually happens. This is the state where what the Zohar calls, or Ein Sof, the infinite light, can begin to penetrate. Not because you performed the ritual perfectly, but because you created the conditions for stillness. And in stillness, something moves. There is a reason these rituals involve physical elements: water, salt, candles, specific objects placed in specific locations. It is not superstition. The physical world is not separate from the spiritual world in Jewish mystical understanding. They are the same world seen from different angles. Every physical object has a spiritual correspondent. When you handle salt with intentionality, you are not just touching sodium chloride. You are engaging with what the tradition understands as the energy of purification, of preservation, of covenant. The body knows this even when the mind doesn't. The hands know something the head hasn't caught up to yet. Now there is a warning I must share with you here, and I want you to receive it gently, because it is not meant as a threat. It is meant as protection. The one position that the tradition identifies as genuinely obstructive is not doubt. It is not skepticism. It is contempt that is performed publicly. There is a concept in the Talmud: one who causes others to sin bears a heavier weight than one who sins alone. In the context of spiritual practice, this means if you perform a ritual while openly mocking it, especially in front of others who do believe, you are doing something that creates real energetic damage, not just to yourself, but to the people around you whose faith you are weakening. The tradition takes this seriously, not because your skepticism offends God or affirm the Creator is not fragile, but because faith is a living thing in a community and contempt is a virus. This is the one form of doubt the tradition genuinely cautions against. Not private uncertainty, not honest questioning. Contemptuous public performance of disbelief. Avoid this, not for the sake of appearances, for the sake of the people around you who are trying to heal. We are approaching the heart of what I want to share with you today, and I want you to listen to this very carefully. The Talmud records a moment when Rabbi Akiva, one of the greatest sages in Jewish history, saw something that caused his colleagues to weep while he laughed. They were standing at a place of great desolation, looking at ruins, and his colleagues wept at the destruction. But Akiva laughed, and when they asked him why, he said, "Because this destruction is proof that the promises of desolation came true. And if those promises came true, so too will the promises of restoration. If one part of the prophecy was fulfilled, I have absolute confidence the other part will be as well." This is the model of faith that the tradition actually asks of us, not blind optimism, not the suppression of evidence, but the ability to look at the evidence of difficulty, at the ruins of your financial life, your broken relationships, your health struggles, and extract from that very evidence the certainty that transformation is coming, because the system is real. because the spiritual laws are operating, because the same force that allowed desolation is the same force that has promised abundance. Your ruins are not proof that the rituals don't work. They may be proof that the ritual and the deeper opening it requires has not yet fully begun. Here is what I want to leave you with. The question was, can these rituals work for skeptics? And the honest answer, rooted in the deepest levels of Kabbalistic tradition, is this: they can, they do, not always instantly, not always dramatically, but the action creates a channel. The honesty creates an opening. The willingness, even reluctant, even uncertain willingness, is already a form of surrender that the divine energy can work with. You do not need to believe perfectly. You need to act sincerely. You need to bring your actual self, doubts included, to the practice, and let the practice begin to reveal itself to you over time. There is a phrase in Hebrew, na'aseh v'nishma. It comes from the moment the Israelites received the Torah at Sinai. Translated, it means, we will do and we will understand. Not we will understand and then we will do. The doing comes first. The understanding follows. This has always been the Jewish way. It is the most psychologically sophisticated approach to spiritual practice ever devised. Do first. The comprehension, the conviction, the deep bone knowing, all of that arrives through the doing, not before it. So if you are sitting here uncertain, if you have doubt and questions and a part of you that resists, do not wait until that part is quiet to begin. Begin with it present. Begin with your whole complicated self. Light the candle. Place the salt. Say the words. Not because you are certain they work, but because you are not certain they don't. And because somewhere beneath all your layers, in the part of you that never doubts, in the neshama that is eternally connected to its source, in that part of you something already knows. Something already recognizes this. Something is already reaching. Let that reaching be enough to begin. May the actions you take in uncertainty become the foundation of a certainty you cannot yet imagine. May every doubt you bring honestly to the threshold of the sacred be received with the same warmth as perfect faith. May you discover in your own life and in your own time that the universe has always been listening, even to the questions, even to the silences, even to the moments when you weren't sure anyone was there. Amen. If this teaching opens something in you, share it with someone who is searching. Subscribe to this channel so these teachings continue to reach you, because the wisdom we share here is meant to find the people who need it most. And perhaps that is exactly why it found you today.